Welcome to Let's Play Gran Turismo 3, episode 97. Alright, so we have 4 endurance events remaining, and for this segment we are now going to do the Laguna Seca endurance. And like for Grand Valley, I've already decided on which car I'm using, and it's basically time for me to head back over to the car dealer to use my next car. So, gonna head up to Japan and over to Honda, and if I just immediately go straight along here, this is the car I'm using. The Honda Castrol Mugen NSX. Now, one colour, unfortunately, and of course these are the stats, and let's buy this bitch. Because it is the car I want to use for our next event, because I dare to give myself a standout image. Now we're going to do the usual super slick strategy, because that's basically what has brought me to victory in all the other endurance events so far. And well, just because I feel my car might be just a wee bit underpowered, I'm going to put on the Stage 1 engine as well. Even though I probably don't need it, and I'm also going to do an oil change, you know, just to make this thing a little bit more competitive, and hopefully that should be everything we need for our next event, which is the Laguna Seca 200 miles endurance. Now you may notice down there it says 200 kilometers, but I can assure you this event, from personal experience, is definitely longer than 200 kilometers, because that's only like 125 miles. This event is definitely longer than that. And 300 grand if we can win this event, and I think it's 90 laps around Laguna Seca, and where I would imagine we're probably going to be up against a pretty fierce competition. And oddly enough, that has not disappointed me. So we have a Gillett Vertigo in the field, along with a Dodge Viper GTS-R, a Chevy Corvette C5R, a Merc CLK, and the Ford GT40. So, just going to remove the driver aids as I usually do. Downforce looks okay, although just because I want to be cautious, I'm going to give this thing just a wee bit more downforce so that I can make it through the corners, and yeah, let's do this. And yep, my microphone is switched on. And here we go, for 90 laps and somewhere over 2 hours of driving Laguna Seca, as I'm already up to second place in the matter of just a single corner. And already, as I anticipated, the Viper has already opened himself to an early cushion, as things stand at the moment. As I would have anticipated, I am already lacking in speed at the present time. But it's fine, because this course is mainly about the cornering speeds, and also about the notoriousness that is the notoriousness of the corkscrew. Oh, fuck me. Fuck. And now it means I'm really gonna have to get the hammer down. I mean, I almost thought for sure I had it saved, but then I suddenly started spinning, and it was basically the Corvette that spun me into that mistake, and as much as I really tried to avoid it, in the end it was unavoidable, and already the Viper has opened himself up to a 10-second lead. It doesn't look as though I'm going to be closing up to the Viper anytime soon. But at the very least I am starting to maneuver myself through the field, as I am already up to 3rd position in the short space of just 2 laps after spinning at the end of the first lap, even though it wasn't all my fault because the Corvette caused me to go into a spin when I almost saved it, and he basically denied me the opportunity of actually saving this fucking thing. And at the moment, things are not going down because I am already 11 seconds down from the fucking Viper. He was basically just gone on a tearaway streak up to this point. And it doesn't look like I'm going to be closing in anytime soon. Looks like I'm starting to narrowly close in. I mean, I'm definitely closing in on the Corvette. Although, because this car is not as hard on the tyres as the muscle cars are in this race, I'm hoping and praying that once the Viper stops in, if it does, that I will manage to get an opportunity of fighting for the lead, because that's what my primary goal is. And I am starting to close in on the Viper again, because the gap is now down to 12 seconds. So there are certain sectors where I'm quicker than the Viper, but also certain sectors where the Viper is quicker than me. But oddly enough, through those first 2 sectors, I really managed to claw some time back on the Viper from what I previously lost when I spun at the end of the first lap. And I'm already closing in on the Corvette, so that must mean, of course, that tyres are potentially playing a part in this race, and maybe not all hope is lost. And yes, I did put on the engine tuning because I figured I was going to be down on power heading into this race, but again, I've made a commitment to my choice, and I would definitely say if I used the Lister Storm for this race, then I would probably be more than from what I'm currently behind at the present time. And it looks as though the Corvette just bounced there in the gravel trap, as I would have expected him to, and already I'm now back up into 2nd place. And even though I am pushing hard at the moment, it's purely because of the grip and acceleration that this car currently has, being the main reason why I am starting to not fall too far behind the lead. Because even though I'm not closing in by too much over the Viper, I would definitely say it's only a matter of time before he stops in for tyres. And then when he does, I should be able to capitalise on that and persevere, hopefully, with the race lead. I would imagine it's not going to be too long before the snack draws himself into the pits. I'm hoping it will not be too long. Although, I'm really starting to lose some time again because the Viper must have noticed my lap times and he started going foot to the floor himself. But I am hopeful in saying that this strategy will work. And if it does not, then well, I will be hugely disappointed in myself for not using this car for Gran like I should have done. But again, I dare to be different. I'm currently 11 seconds back from the Viper at the moment, so it appears as though we're both pretty much split 50-50 in terms of overall lap time, because already after just 6 laps the Corvette is in the pits for the first time, and hopefully it will not be too long before the Viper has to stop in, because I would imagine his tyres will not be able to last much longer, and then once he does pit, that is officially when I will hopefully manage to take the lead for the first time. So, really starting to close in on the Viper. Doesn't look as though the snack is going to stay in the lead for much longer before he darts himself into the pits, as the gap is now only 10.5 seconds. This matters currently stand. Right, so heading through Corkscrew once again, and keeping myself in check with what has already happened, and I'm really closing in on the Viper now, so his tyres must be wearing off if the gap is now down to 10 seconds. I must be really closing in with this car because this car has got stronger tyre management than the Viper does, and I'm definitely closing in on the Viper, so his tyres must really be starting to wear off up to this point. So I do not predict I will win this race altogether, but all I can really say after this point is, oh fuck me, that not all hope is lost. Unless I keep doing that, then all hope might be lost. So not all hope is lost, because the gap is now down to only 9 seconds, in spite of me fucking up on the backstretch. But I am hopeful in saying that I will manage to close in on the Viper before too long. So his tyres are really starting to go off, and he's in the pits. The Dodge is now in the pits, and this is officially where the race in terms of strategy could very well be decided. Whilst he is in the pits, that now leaves me to officially take the lead for the first time. Finally, after 8 laps of waiting to see when the Viper will finally dart into the pits. But again, he will be on a fresher set of rubber than I am, so it will not be too long before he reels me back in, because I'm pretty sure that's what the Dodge will do. And I do also have a plan for the Viper once I'm done with this event, because I want to keep some of these events linked towards tradition. And even though I previously used the Nissan Calsonic Skyline for Laguna Seca previously, I chose to use the Honda NSX because I figured stronger tyre management might be the smarter choice to go for in order to officially win this event. And of course I did also put on a stage 1 tuning engine if I was lacking in power, because well, I figured that was more or less necessary. So don't want to cross over the pit lane line too much. Let's race. So the gap is currently 10.4 seconds, managing to more or less maintain a steady lead over the Viper as I am steadily extending the interval. Although I would imagine it won't be too much longer before he has to pit in again, and then when he does, which I would imagine will be in about 6 laps time, that is probably when I shall make a stop as well. Which means of course that when pit stops happen, I will be able to keep myself ahead of the Dodge Viper as long as I do not make any further mistakes. So, not pushing too hard up to this point in the race, more or less just keeping my car in check with what exactly this AI are doing. I'm not really pushing too hard at the moment. I also don't know how to set up cars, but at the very least I can definitely say that I know how exactly to choose my cars for these events. And I think for this I may have made a potentially wise decision on choosing a Honda. So the Viper is starting to claw back the time you lost in the pits. But again, I would imagine it's not going to be too long before he has to pit in again. He probably will take the lead back from me before I make my first scheduled pit stop. Although I'm hoping that won't be the case because, well, I am hopeful in saying that this strategy will work. Even though I did of course put on stage 1 of engine tuning just in case. And yep, the snack is really clawing in on the interval that I already have up to this point. So he is not going to let me stay out in front for much longer, I don't think. Though, because this car appears to have salvaging advantage of holding on, with tyre management, I would imagine that is precisely where this race will probably be decided. Because this car, compared to both the Snack and the Corvette, definitely has stronger tyre management, and that is precisely where my closest advantage will come in this race at the end of the day. The last couple of endurance events have been pretty interesting up to this point. Because I've notably managed to win 2 F1 cars up to this point also managed to keep myself locked in a battle with the AI. Which oddly enough is one thing I didn't think was going to be part of what I've already managed to salvage out of this thing. So, I would say my tyres are probably good to go for presumably another couple of laps, considering the Viper does have to stop in again. At the end of lap 16. I'm pretty sure these tyres can go a little further than that, judging by what I've already managed to achieve. Because it would appear as though the Viper will be pitting in again in around about 2 laps time. If he's going to be pitting in every 8 laps, I would imagine that will probably make for a total of about, I think, 11 pit stops, as far as I know. So, tremendous stuff going here. At Laguna Seca. We are only 14 laps into this event and we still have a long way to go before this thing is done. And I run wide at turn 3. We are closing in on some lapped traffic, and who is that at the back? It looks like it might be the GT40 that's at the back at the moment. Is that the GT40 I see back there, or is that the Merc? It looks like the GT40 might be at the back, and I think it is the GT40 that is at the back of the pack behind the Merc. So it would appear as though Ford have really not managed to give themselves a car that is competent enough to run up front. And he runs wide at the final corner, trying my hardest not to collide with him, as I successfully managed to do so, and already I have overlapped my first back marker, but the Viper is closing in. It will not be too long before he does manage to take the lead away from me again, because the only thing I can really do up to this point is keep going as long as I can on this set of boots and try not to make any major mistakes like I did on the first lap. Although that was more or less going to happen once I got loose, but again, because of how aggressive these AI are in this game, they really don't care if you're alive or dead. They will still do whatever it takes to beat you in a race, even if that means unlawfully wrecking you, because that's basically what I think this AI will do to you no matter what. And quite surprisingly at the moment, the Merc CLK is actually running ahead of the GT40, probably because he's not making as many mistakes during the lap. And just as I predicted, the Viper is now in the pits again at the end of... Oh, fuck me. I had a missteer as I went through the corner, but anyways. The Viper is now in the pits once again, and I don't think these tyres are going to last too much longer, but again, the mileage has been pretty good up to this point. So I would imagine not all hope is completely lost up to this point. Considering I was ahead of the Viper before the pit stops took place, and I've also managed to keep myself ahead of the Viper pretty much since he made his first pit stop. Already I'm starting to extend my interval once again over the Viper, so he's not looking too precarious in terms of being a contender up to this point, because I'm more or less a pit stop clear of the Viper by now, who I think is still behind the GT40, although I would imagine by now he's probably overlapped him, because the GT40 just keeps making pretty much rookie mistakes in my honest opinion. And it could also be possible to say that maybe I did not need to put the engine tuning on this thing, just to prove that I can win this thing. Maybe I did not need to put more power into the motor, just to make myself more competitive. Although I more or less felt like I was going to be underpowered compared to the Viper anyways, so I decided I would make it just a wee bit easier for myself, so that I am, effectively up to par with the AI, because I would imagine they probably do have somewhere over 550 horsepower, whereas I probably have somewhere around about 550 horses. And it would appear as though tyre wear is starting to come towards me, because I almost spun again before I officially managed to save it. I was definitely close to losing it. And it would appear as though at the moment, everything is more or less falling into the crutches of my hands because of my tyre management, and also because of how impressive my car has been up to this point since I put the hammer down, because I knew very well that I had to get moving, and I've now put the Corvette one lap down as a result of him making what is now, I think, pit stop number 3, so he is now a lap down along with the Merc CLK and the GT40. And it would appear as though the Viper is once again closing in on my interval, and I think I can go probably a couple more laps on these tyres before I really do need to make the stop, and then once I have done, that's ultimately when I will manage to officially keep myself going. at the moment I'm not really faring too well in terms of steering on the NSX, but again, I'm still managing to keep more or less a steady interval ahead of the snack up to this point, as of which this has been a pretty interesting race considering the circumstances that both of us have had to work under. And I'm pretty sure these tyres are still looking good up to this point. The circumstances have been more than interesting enough to prove that I definitely have the competence of this thing to now prove, of course, that I can actually win this thing. And even though it's mainly American muscle cars that are the competition in this event, there is nothing that officially tells me a Japanese touring car like this one cannot win this event. And, ironically enough, because of how much more and I would think because of how much more capable this car is of managing tyres compared to the Viper, that is ultimately where I have officially outsmarted him. As Richard Petty would say, I may not be able to beat him on pure speed, but at least I can say I've managed to outsmart him in terms of tyre choice. And the Corvette is trying his hardest to get back on the lead lap, even though I really don't think there's any point to be completely honest, because he will have to pit in again in about 2 laps time, considering he is stopping in pretty much every 6 laps, which means of course that by the end of this race he will have made a total of 14, maybe even 15 pit stops, dependent on how poorly managed his tyres are. And it looks as though, at the moment, I can probably go further than 24 laps on this set of boots, because even though I've been loose for pretty much 12 laps now, the truth is, this car is still looking good, and furthermore, my tyres are still keeping more or less in line with the tread, which is precisely why I've managed to stay out in the lead for this long. Almost losing the rear end there once again, but managing to keep it under control as things stand. It appears as though my tyres are getting just a wee bit worn down up to this point, so I would think I can probably go a couple more laps on this set of boots, but again, the tyres with this car have been very well managed in comparison to the Viper. And that's exactly where I have officially outsmarted him in terms of the strategy overall. So I think I'll give this about probably 2, maybe even 3 more laps before I have to stop in, because I've still not stopped for a tyre change in this race. imagine it will not be too much longer before we officially end up making pit stop number 1. Although, I'm pretty sure I can go at least maybe 2 or 3 more laps on this set of boots before the problems really start to emerge. Oh my god, I just literally drifted through that first corner. It was literally a perfect drift that was, through the first corner. I literally just drifted my way through that first corner. Which oddly enough is one thing I did not think I was going to achieve. And ironically enough, this car does actually have an act for drifting, as I've just noticed. Although, I don't want to end up doing it too many times, because I could very well lose the rear end of this thing and end up in the gravel if I'm not careful. Which, you know, probably is the main reason why I have to keep this thing under control. Although, oddly enough, up to this point, I am now officially 35 seconds clear of I'm now officially 35 seconds clear of the Viper, as things stand at the moment, and yet I've still not stopped it for tyres. I think it would appear as though I probably have made a wise decision to go for the Honda NSX for this race. And ironically enough, I can see why exactly this is paying off. Because this car does a much better job of managing tyres than the muscle cars do, so... It appears as though we do have a potential opportunity going just a wee bit further on these tyres, if that is at all possible. So it looks as though my rear tyres are starting to notice some potential signs of degradation. Thinking as though it's literally taken me 26 laps to get this far on a set of boots without cooking the tyres. Although I would still think this event will probably take me somewhere over 2 hours to complete, as things currently stand. I've noticed the Viper has been staying with me on pure pace alone. Oh shit. I should have known I was going to spin around again at some point, because yeah, my tyres are definitely looking worn to this point. So I think I might be able to go just a little bit further on these tyres, and we'll see what happens, because I'm sliding around a lot. I would think, up to this point in the race, that once my pit stop is made and I don't spin around too much, I could very well still rejoin the lead by pure comparison to the Viper. So I might be able to go as long as 30 laps if I wanted to, but I will try and see if I can go just a wee bit further. But tyre mileage with this thing has been proven to be more than depressing enough to keep me out ahead of the snack as things currently stand. The snack has not been able to close in by too much since he made that pit stop, so I would think I probably should be able to make about potentially 1 or 2 more laps on this set of boots before stopping in, because that is how well managed this car has been to stay ahead of the Laguna considering the circumstances. So at the moment it looks like I probably will be able to hold on to potentially the lead up to this point. I really don't see any reason why I'm not going to win the race up to this point, because it looks like I might be able to go potentially 2 or 3 more laps on this set of boots before I finally stop in. Considering I am nearly a third of the entire distance in this race. So, 29 laps are now complete, and we are 39 minutes into this race, as my lap times have been considerably stabilising, considering how much wear I notably have on these tyres at the moment. And because of how good this car is at managing tyres, as I have discovered throughout this race, that is ultimately what has managed to keep me ahead of the Dodge. So I think I'll go 2 more laps on this set of tyres just to keep myself going. And as long as I don't make any major mistakes in the race up to this point, then hopefully I might be able to rejoin in the lead. But again, the rear end has really been stepping out quite a lot these past couple of laps because of how worn these tyres have been. I've really been trying my hardest to hold on to this car by pretty much a thread and needle, and I would think the next lap will probably be the best lap for me to get in, because it doesn't look like my rear tyres are going to last much longer, I don't think. It looked as though somebody touched the gravel trap there and probably spun, although I probably won't be able to tell you who that was until I manage to get a confirmation. Anyways, the Merc is now in the pits for what I think is probably the second time now. Although it's impossible to say for sure, because he is now going to be potentially 2 laps down by the time this is done. I couldn't tell you what the strategy is of the Merc up to this point, but he could very well beat the GT40 the way things are currently standing, and I'm basically just slipping and sliding around on the set of tyres, trying to see if I can make this potentially a 2-stop race, although it won't matter anyway because the Viper stops in once again for what is now pretty much the 4th time in 32 laps, because he's been pitting in every fucking... Oh wait, hold on. Did the Viper actually stop it? No, I don't think he did. Well, it's still behind me, so... Okay, well... Just made a little bit of contact there with the GT40, although it doesn't matter too much because he now comes into the pits and... It pretty much looks as though this will probably be the lap where I stop him. Because the Viper is now in the pits, and I would think this will probably be the best lap for me to finally stop him for my first set of tyres. Because this car is getting really squirrely up to this point. I just spun again, so... I have no idea how the CLK was literally able to thread himself through that after I spun. I have no idea how he was able to do that. But I think it looks like my tyres by now are probably shot, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pit in this lap just because the grip over the past few laps has basically been nowhere. But again, it does astonish me on knowing this car has managed to make it over a third of a distance. Over pretty much a third of a distance just on one set of tyres. And I think that means, of course, this will probably be potentially a 2-stop strategy, as I now come in for stop number 1. I'm now going to have a sip of water whilst I am here. Right, back to the action. And so, here we go. We are back on track once again for the start of lap 34. I went as far as 33 laps on one set of boots, and ultimately I would imagine that is precisely where I will ultimately win this race, because tyre management on this car has literally been excellent, and I would think it will only be a matter of time before I start setting a string of fastest laps this race. And so the snack is now behind me once again, but again it will not be for too much longer before he has to pit in again, because even though he pitted in on lap 32, he will have to stop in again at the end of lap 40, so the Dodge is right behind me once again, but fortunately I don't think he will be a major... Excuse me. But I don't think he will be a major player in this race once it comes down to strategy. I've managed to stay ahead of the snack for this long, and I think because of my tyre management, and made a little bit of contact there with the GT40, even though he was trying to stay one lap down, but inevitably he did have to concede the position and surrender his lap to me, and he's also holding up the Viper at the moment, so this could be helpful. as of which the Viper is now 1.5 seconds behind me, and even though he is trying to make a manoeuvre on getting past the GT40, and the GT40 almost spun there at corkscrew. He definitely got loose as he entered the corner, but then suddenly the rear end almost stepped out completely from the GT40 as he was coming up to the exit. Anyways, back to my POV, and the Viper has now officially got past the GT40, as of which I would imagine he was probably pretty pissed over being held up by the GT40 for that long, considering the GT40 and the Merc CLK up to this point are proven to be the clear back markers, as the matters currently stand. And yeah, I just fucked up the entry to that corner completely. Probably because I'm still on relatively cold tyres, but again, it will not take too long for these tyres to warm up, and then once they do, that's when I can start setting a string of faster slaps, hopefully. Considering the snack right now is right on my ass. And considering the circumstances I've been racing under, this has actually been a pretty interesting race. I don't predict I'll win this race, but at the same time, I don't predict I'll lose this race. Although I'm hoping that I'll manage to win. Under all things considered. Because it would be nice if I could win this race, the way things are currently going. So the Merc CLK is once again ahead of the GT40 on strategy, and things at the moment for me and my Honda Castrol Mugen NSX are going very well, because I've managed to lead most of the race up to this point, as we are now 36 laps into this race. Doesn't look like my tyres are quite up to temperature just yet. This car is still pretty loose, even with the downforce I added to this thing just to make the cornering a little bit easier. But again, my incentive of what I think is going to happen as well. The Viper probably will take the lead away from me very briefly, because he's definitely looked quick in those last couple of laps. And I would think before he stops in again, he probably will get past me in terms of straight line speed, because, well, that's just what I think the Dodge is going to do. He's definitely closing in. I am managing to hold on to the lead by a threshold, or at least pretty much by a thread at the moment. As I am now trying to see if I can attempt to go for another fastest lap. And it looks as though he might have worn down his tyres just a little bit, which is probably the main reason why he's not been able to stay up in competition with myself up to this point. But again, this is definitely proving, of course, to be a good race at the moment. Even then, of course, if it's only going to be temporary, because I know for sure the snack will have to stop in again before his stint is done. And meanwhile, for me, I can gladly go as far as 32 laps before I need to stop him again. This could be potentially where I can start setting a string of new best lap times. Basically with my refusing to losing attitude. just really trying to go hard on this thing at the moment, trying to see if I can get the best out of these tyres on setting a new best lap time before this thing is done. And it looks as though I am starting to increase my lead up to this point, and this could be potentially a new best lap time, and indeed it is. I went 5/10 quicker on that lap because I set a 1:17.6 as being my new best lap time after 39 laps, so it would seem as though the way this car is able to attest itself to the tyres as things currently stand, it looks as though this could very well be where I ultimately hold on to the race lead. Now, I don't predict I will overlap the Dodge up to this point because he has looked quick, but again, his tyres have not been able to last long enough to keep up with me, and I almost spun the car around on the exit of Corkscrew. I was literally so close to doing that before it actually happened. Fortunately, I was able to prevent it, as of which, up to this point, I've already spun out twice, and it was basically at the same corner where I did that. One was basically on the first lap, and the other one was pretty much on lap 32, I think it was, when I spun. Well, I don't know, because I don't tend to remember these things very well unless I look back at them on full race replay. But then again, since I would imagine only about probably as many as 84, 85 minutes of a race replay will be saved, or at least, you know, somewhere over an hour of the full race replay will be saved. That's pretty much when I will end up, you know, I will basically need to see myself as being potentially I have no idea why I shifted down to first gear there, but anyways. Of course, I'm setting a reasonable string of lap times within the high 120s, sorry, high 119s, low 118s I would say, are very much where most of my quickest laps have been set. It looks as though I have managed to salvage as many as 33 laps on the first set of boots I wore, and I think on my second set I'm probably going to see myself potentially in contention for heading up to lap 66, I think, will be the strategy for the the final stint, basically going as many as 24 laps on the final set of tyres. And I'm pretty sure this car will make it, because if it has managed to go as long as precisely, you know, 33 laps on the first stint, then I'm pretty sure this will go potentially up to lap 66 before I need to stop in again, because that is ultimately when I will make what will potentially be the second and hopefully final pit stop of the day overall. Which means, of course, that I have ultimately outsmarted the AI purely because of tyre management within the proximity of this car's capabilities of managing tyres quite well, I should say. And I really don't know if I gained any lap time from doing that or if I lost some. I honestly don't know. So, almost an hour into this race, and I'm definitely proving, of course, that it will probably take me just over 2 hours to complete this race, methinks. Considering I'm almost at the 45th lap, and that is technically the halfway point of this race overall. Couldn't tell you who just pitted in, but I think it was the Corvette again, because he's been pitting in pretty much every he's pretty much been pitting in every 6 laps, it looks like. And I'm now less than half a minute clear of the Viper as things currently stand, and we are just about an hour into this race, which means, of course, it will probably be midday by the time I've completed this, because I'm recording this on a Thursday morning, and I think this will probably end up being the race that ultimately leaves me with just 3 races to go overall. So, my lap times are still pretty reasonable, it looks like, considering I have gone as many as 12 laps on this stint with the tyres, and I'm also doing very well in terms of tyre management, because that is exactly where this car has been able to beat the mighty V8s. Because that is exactly where this VTEC engine has managed to beat those V8 motors. As things currently stand. Because those engines are good, but obviously the cars themselves are still too hard on the tyres, and that's exactly where that's precisely where I think most of the confidence has been with this car, and why exactly I've managed to stay ahead of the Viper for so long. Well, my lap times are still relatively even. I mean, I have set a 117.6. I mean, even though I've not set a string of fastest laps, obviously, my lap times are still within the 118s at the moment, because I haven't officially spun out. Because even though I've not been setting a string of fastest laps as some people would expect me to do, I'm still setting relatively even lap times as things currently stand. Oh shit! I almost got airborne there as I touched the curb, but somehow I was able to save it without sustaining too much damage as I fucked up the entry to corkscrew. And it looks as though the Corvette is now trying to overlap the GT40 as he once again runs wide at the final corner. So 47 laps are now complete, and this is ultimately what I think the running order is. So in first position is myself in the Honda Castrol Mugen NSX, pretty much what some would say is the master of tyre management compared to everyone else. In second position, it looks like it is still the Dodge Viper, and I would imagine he is going to pit again on this lap for a set of boots. And is also managing to stay ahead of the Gillett Vertigo, who has been more or less consistent on the tyres he's been running on. And then in fourth position is the Chevy Corvette C5R that is just in front of me, and it looks like he is about to go 3 laps down by the time I've caught up to him. His car has really given me a calm and cool demeanour to just get on with the job at hand, as which I believe I have now put the GT40 3 laps down, from what I can understand, because he's been pitting in, I think, every 15 laps up to this point, and not being able to mount any challenges on the Corvette at the present time, but again, whilst he continues to make the mistakes, I just continue to get through the corners better than he does. And I'm now closing in on the Merc CLK, it looks like, as I am getting a tow. And we do have quite an interesting variety of race cars in this event. I ran just a wee bit wide there through corkscrew, but I still managed to overlap him for what is now the 3rd time in this race. So both the GT40 and the CLK are now officially 3 laps down, and the Corvette has still not managed to overlap the Merc. He got a little bit loose there on the rear end as he went through the final corner, but ultimately we now have just 41 laps to go, and if I am fortuitous enough, it will ultimately be just 1 pit stop left. Because that is exactly where I have managed to outsmart the Viper in terms of my strategy. Because if I was not going to beat him in terms of on-track pace, then I would certainly beat him in terms of tyre strategy, which is precisely where exactly I've been managing to successfully stay as little as just a few yards ahead of the Viper, and also as big as quite a few yards, I would say. I do not know how exactly I can use my wording, but I think I've given it enough of an explanation. And I probably need to move my hand in a minute, my right hand, because the wire from my headset is over my hand, and I should probably move it in a minute. Probably by the time we get down to Corkscrew, I'll move it out of the way just so it's not too much of a problem. I basically had to wait until the final corner for me to move my hand away from the wire on my headset, since I figured that was probably the best opportunity I had, and I just took it. So 49.7 seconds is now the interval to the Viper. Appear as though at the present time everything has more or less been considerable. Ultimately, I am now well ahead of the rest of the field. And so, here I am once again. Tyre conservation has very much what exactly has brought me so far into the race and yet so far ahead of the snack as things currently stand, because I am 46 seconds clear of the snack the way things are currently standing, and already I am starting to yawn, because I've been on this for over an hour now and there isn't anything else that can wake me up. Although I'm still having to keep myself going, because I would say I'm more or less going to hold on to the lead regardless of how much the snack will close in, because I know for sure that once he does manage to catch up to me, he will be, I think, low in terms of tyre management, because obviously he will have pushed those tyres too hard up to this point. Even though his tyres are only set to last about as many as 8 laps anyway, but again, I would say I am now more or less going to put myself in pretty much the, you know, oh shit, it's alright, it's fine. Almost over sure I lost it again there, but unfortunately in the end I didn't, because that is how much more superior this car is in terms of its tyre conservation or management to make it simpler to those who don't understand high vocab wording. I have not seen any major excursions from the snack, so it looks as though he is going to stay behind me as matters currently stand. Although I myself, of course, in the GT Touring car, am very much staying ahead of the Le Mans prototype as things stand, considering that's exactly what both the Viper and the Corvette are. They're basically Le Mans prototypes, as ones would call them, because they both competed at Le Mans, I should say. And well, since I figured, of course, that I'd driven every Super GT Honda NSX in this game, I figured this, of course, would be the car that I would drive for Laguna Seca, and by God, this strategy has worked immensely. Because I am a long way ahead of the rest of the field, as matters currently stand. So perhaps overlapping the Dodge as things stand at the moment is not completely out of the question. But again, I still think I would have to be pretty lucky to overlap the Viper as things would stand, because, well, on a fresh set of tyres he has looked quick. And I'm pretty sure that whilst there are still so many laps to go in this race, I would think it's almost an understatement to say that this race is over. It's just a matter of knowing, of course, if the driver of the Honda NSX is competent enough to make it to the end without making too many mistakes. As of which, I have made quite a few mistakes up to this point, but it's ultimately because of this car's masterful tyre management by pure comparison to the rest of the field that I've officially managed to go onwards this long into. to officially holding on for pretty much dear life and hoping that this car will not have any major offs like it did before. Because I think I've spun like 2 or 3 times during this race, as I would have more or less expected myself to. And also, through certain parts of this race, I've also been drifting my way through these corners. And it now looks as though after 58 laps of driving, I'm officially going to overlap the Vertigo, who ironically enough is the only other competitor that is on the same lap as both myself and the Viper. So fatigue is starting to get to me just a little bit, but again, I don't think it's going to affect me too much, because I'm still out in front of the rest of the field as the matter currently stands, as I now once again overlap the GT40 for what is now the 4th time in this race, considering that is literally how far down in terms of laps he is. The GT40 is literally 4 laps down, and I have no idea how he manages to keep saving it off the exit of corkscrew. I mean, he's just literally slipping and sliding through there. There's got to be something at corkscrew that's basically causing him to get loose all of a sudden. And for good measure, he once again fucks up the final corner and allows the Vertigo to pretty much go right past him, it looks like. Although, I don't think the Viper is going to get any closer to me than he was on the previous stint when I finally pitted in for tyres and he came so close to me that he was actually challenging me for the lead at one point. But again, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case this time, because I am over a minute ahead of the Viper as things currently stand, which is basically less than a lap. Considering how most of my lap times on this race have been under the 1 minute 17 mark, sorry, have been under the 1 minute 20 mark, where some of my most consistent lap times have officially been set. So we now have just 30 laps remaining in this race after driving 60 laps and 80 minutes, and also furthermore, yes, there is no escape road. And I think that's only like the 3rd time where I've actually run wide at a corner, is what me thinks. So I'm going to have to go into conservative mode with these tyres if I'm going to make the pit stop in reasonable time. So I think I'm going to be easier on the tyres for probably these next 6 laps. That will of course allow the Viper to catch up again, but as long as I don't make any major... But as long as I don't bottle this majorly, then I would say a win is more or less an accessible possibility, as long as as long as I can keep myself in check with the rest of the field. That is, of course, the reason why I'm going slower than I usually would. And also, because I know the Viper is guaranteed to pit in over the next 2 laps, it will not be long before he pits in again, and then once he does, that will just allow me to continue my conservative mode of staying out in front. So 62 laps are now complete. I once again overlapped the Merc CLK for what is now officially the 4th time in this race. I do not know how many pit stops the Merc has made up to this point, but I'm pretty sure by now he is officially 4 laps down. So I'm not sure on what his strategy plan is, but I think his plan has been to stop him presumably every 29 laps, but I don't know for sure because I'm not keeping up with the back markers. I'm only really keeping up with the front of the pack officially. Corvette is now in the pits once again, and it will only be a matter of time before I put him 3 laps down. And I can feel a sneeze coming on. Just only hoping it does not spew itself out onto my desk like it already has done. So, 63 laps are now complete. We still have 27 remaining. And the snack is once again closing in on myself. And I would imagine after he's made his pit stop, he will probably close in even further. But it just depends on knowing, of course, how many more mistakes in this race I'll be making. Because I've been crashing a lot race. I mean, even though I've not been seeing myself in the concrete walls, I've still been very close to making contact with the walls without there being, you know, any major needs for spin outs up to this point. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just really don't know how to properly explain my words. It's like I just cannot find the words of how dominant I've basically been since I made that first stint of precisely fucking that is a confirmation of proving that my replay save is now complete, and it also means that we now have just about, I think, 25 laps remaining after this one. So I'll give you a rundown of what the order is at the present time. So ultimately, it is both myself and the Dodge Viper who are officially on the lead lap. Then, in third place, one lap down, is the Vertigo, as of which he has basically been one lap down since I overlapped him. So here is the rundown after 65 laps in this race. So I'm still leading by over a minute ahead of the Dodge Viper as the matter currently stands. Then, in third place, one lap down, it is the Vertigo. Followed by the Chevrolet Corvette C5R, who I think is now 3 laps down up to this point. And then, in both 5th and 6th position, both of them pretty much being, I think, 4 laps down by now, are officially the Merc CLK Touring Car and the GT40. And it looks as though this will be the lap where I pit in again. And I just knew that was going to happen sooner or later. So I think that's pretty much a clear indication of, oh fuck me. And the Vertigo is now back on the lead lap. Although it doesn't matter what happens with him because, well, I think that pretty much means my tyres are dead, so I need to... can I please stop spinning everywhere? I'd actually shit myself if I keep doing this. Anyways. Into the pits once again. And once again, unusually shifting down into first gear for some reason. And this is now going to be the second and final pit stop of the day. Also, furthermore, as a result of those spins that I had, because I literally spun out 3 times on that previous lap before I changed the tyres, I set under a sub 2 minute time as a result of the spins I had. So this car really does not like being on worn tyres, particularly if the tyres themselves are on the rears. Now, I could have taken the risk and gone a little bit further on the tyres, but again, I would just be spinning out too much, so I had to change the tyres at the end of the lap. Not just for myself, but also for the sake of the car actually having the grip to get to the end of the race. Because I'm pretty sure that will be the final pit stop I have to make today, and then all I have to do now is just keep myself ahead of the Dodge for as long as I can. Considering I've only had to make 2 pit stops during this race, and I think it's fair to say that my integrity in using the Honda NSX, as well as my ambition on using the NSX, has proven to be more than just successful. So, at the completion of 67 laps for me, the Honda NSX is continuing to... sorry, the Dodge Viper is continuing to close in, since I am still on relatively cold tyres at the moment, because of how good tyre management is on the NSX. I'm getting a little bit sketchy through there, but only because I'm trying to warm up the tyres. And hopefully I might be able to give myself something I can come in tandem with. So the snack is closing in once again, but ultimately I don't think he's going to do enough to prevent me from winning this race, because he will have to pit in again before the end of this race, almost certainly. But I think after the pit stop that he's already made up to this point, he will have just 2 more pit stops to make after lap 72, because he will have to pit in again on laps 80 and 88. As far as I can work out. And the Corvette is once again in the pits, as of which I can now confirm, of course, he is nearly 3 laps down, and probably will be before this race is over. And I was trying to screw the lid on my bottle, but again, I shifted down into 3rd as I went through the corner by mistake, and oddly enough, I'm still slipping and sliding at the moment. Just basically trying to screw the lid on my bottle, because I still have quite a bit of water in there. And I'll probably chug it down by the time this race is done, because I will probably be exhausted from giving you all the running commentary. Whilst I'm also trying to screw the lid on the bottle that is right in front of myself and my TV. So once this lap is done, we should have just 20 laps left to go in this race. It looks as though I have been decisive enough to win this race as far as I know, in terms of overall lap time that I've managed to gain, and ultimately it would appear as though this is where the race strategies have officially been decided. And it looks as though someone just threw up a cloud of dust there as they spun through the gravel trap. I am curious on knowing if that was either the Merc or the GT40. Well, had to be the Merc as far as I know, because I would think by now he's probably going to be about 4 laps down from myself, and whilst the Viper is continuing to close in on my interval, the truth is, his tyres, I know for sure, will only last this lap and then the next lap, and then he will pit in again for another set of rubber. And the gap has now increased to 15.6 seconds, and well, since I know for sure I do not have to make another pit stop before this race is done, as though I have officially made the race winning strategy, as far as I know. So victory up to this point, I would say, is more or less as good as mine, as my tyres have now warmed up, and hopefully I can now set some consistently good lap times, even then of course if my engine at the moment is saying that predicament, because I've only got about another 50k to go before this engine blows. Although then again, because mechanical failures aren't a thing in this game, it will only be another 50 kilometers before my engine light, sorry, my oil light turns red, and that will ultimately be where, of course, the engine has pretty much passed its best. And ironically enough, in some cases I would say that is relating, of course, to poor reliability. But again, because mechanical faults are not a thing in this game, fortunately, I would say I can basically go as long as the event will last, this thing. Although one thing that is for certain is that I will have probably driven somewhere over 200 miles by the time this event is done. Because I think it's about 321 kilometers for assumingly 200 miles. I think it's about 321 kilometers for 200 miles, as far as I know. So I'm pretty sure this event will probably be longer than 200 miles by the time I'm done with this. And I am now closing in on the Vertigo once again, so I don't know if he's a lap down or if he's 2 laps down by now, because I've not been keeping up to date with how exactly the race strategies have been working up to this point. I would say he is probably 2 laps down by now, but it's most likely to be 1 lap, because the Vertigo has been pretty consistent with his tyre mileage as well, on which set of boots he's been wearing, because he's actually been pretty good up to this point. And ultimately, I now have just 17 laps to go in this race before the checkered flag is dropped. And since the Viper stopped in again, I think this is going to be more or less an easy victory, as I'm now just trying to unzip my jacket. And I don't think I'm able to do it on this form of stretch, because I won't be able to do it without crashing, I don't think. But it's fine, because I mean, I do have a 37.8 second lead over the Viper anyway, so I think whatever does happen from here is that, well, I do not think I will be denied any possibilities of a win up to this point. So 74 laps are down, still 16 to go. It looks as though I have very much given the rest of these AI a road blow in terms of my tyre strategy. The incentive that I pretty much have over the AI is the fact that I've just been predominantly more consistent with my fresh set of boots. Because even though my rear tyres have been taking in more of the damage than the front tyres, because, well, rear-wheel drive car, fortunately, I am pretty sure this is where the race itself will be decided, because the Viper still has to make 2 more pit stops before the end of the day, and that will ultimately be what hands the race over to me, because I do not have to stop in again for tyres. With the mileage that I've managed to achieve, and it would appear as though this is going to be a tremendous victory for Honda. The Japanese will have once again bested the Americans because of tyre conservation, because of default of my unity towards tyre longevity as well as tyre conservation ultimately being what has officially managed to get me the victory in this race. Pretty much an undeniable victory up to this point. I have virtually no chance of losing now unless I make a major mistake, but I don't think that's going to happen because these tyres can go as long as about 25, maybe even 26 laps before tyre degradation officially starts to become a problem, but again, these tyres will manage to last as long as exactly 33 laps before they need changing. And so the Vertigo is now in the pits once again. I think he is 1 lap down by now, but I don't know for sure if he is 1 or 2 laps down. And I would assume up to this point he is probably 2 laps down because I've already completed 76 laps up to this point, and I still have another 14 to go before this race is done. And then once I have completed those remaining 14 laps, well, probably 13 laps by now, but you know, this race will be done and I will have just 3 endurance events remaining following this one. It would appear as though the race by now has pretty much been decided. So the Japanese, because I'm driving a Super GT car, has pretty much bested the power of the almighty V8s. As of which I might add, of course, that most of the cars in this race are basically running on V8 engines. If you would of course include the one that is in the Merc CLK. Because he too surprisingly has an 8-cylinder engine, with him being DTM. So 78 laps are now on the board and there is still 12 laps left before this race is done. I am very much a long way ahead of the rest of the field by now, and I would say up to this point, because of tyre longevity along with tyre conservation, I have officially managed to stay a long way ahead of the rest of the field. So here we are then. 11 laps left, and this is still just about the closing stages of the race. So it looks as though I have officially outsmarted the AI once again in terms of giving myself the best tyres to race on in terms of lifespan. Well, pretty much since I made the first pit stop, I've more or less been dominating this race as things currently stand, and that is exactly what has kept me ahead of the Dodge for so long. And also furthermore, I should probably mention, the GT40 by now is on his, I think, 5th pit stop by now, so he's been going as long as 15 laps in the race up to this point, and I think that's now put him 5 laps down. Is what me thinks. So the GT40 is probably 5 laps down by now, and of course the Merc CLK, I would imagine, has already overtaken him once again, because the Merc has been able to undercut him. So the Snack is once again in the pits after 80 laps. He is making his, what will presumably be penultimate pit stop of the race, and then his final pit stop will probably come at the end of lap 88. So that's pretty much handed the race over to me in terms of overall track time, and also in terms of tyre mileage. Because that too, of course, has officially been a factor in giving me more or less the mileage I've been needing to hold on for the race win. So, just 8 laps to go after this one, and then we should be done with endurance event number 7, and then after this we will have just 3 events remaining. The next one will be Route 11 all night, and then we will do the Tokyo Endurance, which undeniably is easily the longest endurance event in the game by some margin. Then our final endurance event will be the Mistral 78 laps, the way things currently stand, as far as I know. It's also nice to see how this track is in a sunset scenery in this game, you know, because I actually like seeing something such as the serenity of a sunset in this game. I think that is actually something I can give attributions for. It's actually nice to see this circuit under a sunset. I think is what this is meant to be. Sunlight here is pretty bright, but at least it isn't as bright here as it is at Monaco, because the sun in like fucking Monaco in this game is basically just blinding you as you head up, as you basically, you know, just head through most of the corners. That is one thing I have noticed about the sun. This game if you're racing at Monaco. So, we now have just 7 laps to go, and it would appear as though I might be able to overlap the Viper before the day is done, because of how conservative I've been on my tyres, and also because of how besottingly overrated my tyre mileage has been all this time. But again, the game itself will probably tell me what the final margins were for the AI by the time we get to the end of this race anyway, so I don't think it really matters too much what the final standings are, but I'm pretty sure the GT40 is engaged in the battle with the Merc CLK. Although, dependent on knowing how that little kerfuffle will end, remains to be seen. So, we now have just 6 laps to go, and it would appear as though I'm now coming to overlap the Merc CLK for what is presumably the 5th time by now, methinks, even though it's probably the 6th. Officially, the Merc is once again just up ahead of me. I think he's probably going to be 6 laps down by the time we reach the end of this race, even though it will probably be 5 laps down to my correction. And so we are once again heading up the hill to Corkscrew, heading back down the hill once again as we head under the Honda Bridge. Once again, presumably for spectators, and I managed to pass the CLK cleanly this time compared to one time where I overlapped him and pretty much wrecked him, I should say. Anyways, 5 laps left in this race, 5 laps to go before the drop of the checkered flag, and also I would imagine this will pretty much be the lap where my oil light turns red. And there it is. So, after driving pretty much 185 miles in this race, I have already noticed the oil light turning on. I think when I did some research on this race overall, it was about, I think, 204.2 miles. Although, dependent on what exactly the distance will be in kilometres, that will probably be where the assumption is, but I would imagine by then I will have probably driven about 204 miles in this race overall. As of which I've now driven 300 kilometres, which is equivalent to precisely 186 miles. Although it doesn't look like I'm going to overlap the Viper. I don't think. Unless he is just up the road from me, but I don't think he is. So it does not look like I'm going to overlap the Viper in the end, but fortunately, for me at least, I have proven, of course, that I can win this event using a Japanese touring car, and that is exactly what I am proving here today. Proving, of course, that I can win at Gran Valley driving a more or less underpowered race car, but again, still having the power, of course, to be conservative enough in taking care of the tyres for as long as I can, and also giving me enough of a breather over the Viper by the end of the race. Considering I've basically led this race since the Viper made his first pit stop on what I think was lap 8, and I think up to this point I can more or less afford to take it easy, so that's what I'm going to do. Of course, I did also put on the stage 1 engine just in case, but it looks as though for this race I probably didn't need that. Just to stay ahead of the Viper, because I'm pretty sure I would have still won this race even if I didn't have the engine tuning on. Guess I just had to be patient and see when exactly I could take the lead. But I think this proves I did not need additional power on the engine just so I could stay competitive. Because that is precisely what has kept me out in front all this time. We are almost at the 2-hour mark now, and it would appear as though this will prove to be the lap where I pretty much win the money. So, it would appear as though I am going to be going to victory lane here at Gran Valley, as we now have just 2 laps to go. And having a look at my clock, it's almost midday, so officially it does look as though I'm going to be on my way to victory once again. So, the Vertigo is right there in front of me. I would think by now he'll probably be about 3 laps down, and I think because the Viper stopped in whilst I wasn't concentrating, he probably will manage to successfully stay on the lead lap unless I can do anything about him. But I would imagine that is not going to be the case, because the Dodge will undeniably be going flat out for his final 2 laps. Anyways, I am now on the final lap, and I have also just hit the 2-hour mark, so it would appear as though the Viper will manage to stay on the lead lap here at Laguna Seca, as it now looks as though I'm going to put the Vertigo, I think, a 2nd lap down by now, as of which this is now the final lap which I am running on. And there is no doubt in saying the Viper will probably be going flat out for those final 2 laps. Even though I am closing in on him, it does not look like I'm going to flat the Viper in the end, unfortunately. Even though I came close, it really doesn't matter, because the only thing I really care about is winning these endurance events, and oddly enough, winning is exactly what I have managed to put in my power, as I now overlap the Vertigo for the 2nd and presumably final time in this race, and as I head through the final corner, it is going to be victory to the Honda Castrol Mugen NSX. Let's fucking go, baby. Yeah! I win at Laguna Seca. Let's now wait for everyone else to finish. And, oh okay, it was 3 laps down. But yeah, let's wait for everyone else. There we go. And finally the GT40 has managed to finish. So in the end of that, I won by 75 seconds over the Dodge Viper, as of which both of us managed to pretty much overlap the rest of the field 2 times at the very least. The Gillett Vertigo finished in 3rd over the Corvette, and we win 300,000 credits. So, in the end of that, both myself and the Viper managed to stay on the lead lap. The Vertigo and the Corvette were 3 laps down, and also, in the end of that race, the Merc and the GT40 were 5 laps down by the end of the day. So, saving another replay as I do, and let's now move onwards to the prize car. And what are we going to win today? Are we going to win something good, even though we only get 3 prize cars for this event? And yes, we do! We win another F1 car. Nice. Very nice! That is unbelievable. Literally, for the 3rd event running, I have won 3 F1 cars in the last 3 endurance events. That is unbelievable. Anyways, we now have just 2 endurance events left. Sorry, 3. First of them is Route 11 all night. Then we have the Tokyo Endurance, and then we finish it all off at Monaco. And before we check out the prize cars, I want to give this thing some maintenance. So, I'm gonna wash it, and I'm also gonna change the oil, considering the oil light turned red right before the end of the race, and in the end of that, we are now 87% complete. My win ratio is still pretty much stabilised up to this point, and in the end of that, I drove 317.2 kilometers, which I think is around about 198 miles, methinks. And so, this is our prize car, and for the 3rd event running, we have won another F1 car. And oddly enough, I've got to be completely honest, this car does actually look pretty good in yellow. Even though it's pretty much, you know, yellow with purple stripes. But again, this thing does look good, if I'm being completely honest. Really does. If you can look at it from a close-up shot. Alright, anyways, I'm done. And so, the Laguna Seca 200 miles is a victory. And next time we shall be doing Route 11 all night. Stay tuned.